All right. So good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's Planetary Pause series. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis, and today we are very excited to have with us Helen Caldicott, live from Sydney, Australia. I think it's 11 o'clock in the morning there. Helen is a noted physician and anti-nuclear advocate. She has been at the forefront of the international peace movement for at least 5 decades. And in the 1970s, she gained prominence in Australia, New Zealand, and North America, speaking on the health hazards of radiation from the perspective of pediatrics. Her early achievements included convincing Australia to sue the country of France over its atmospheric testing of nuclear weapons in the Pacific in 1971 and 2, which brought the practice to an end. She left her medical career eventually to concentrate on calling the world's attention to what she referred to as the insanity of the nuclear arms race and the growing reliance on nuclear power. In 1978, she reinvigorated an organization she had co-founded, Physicians for Social Responsibility. And over time, they recruited at least 23,000 physicians to the organization, which has had worldwide educational efforts, including through the US. And in 1985, this national organization and many others she founded around the world were awarded the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize. She also was nominated for the Nobel Prize by Linus Pauling. So that's quite an achievement in itself. But for a complete list of Helen's outstanding accomplishments and books, I would refer you to her website, which is www.helencaldicott.com. Yeah, I don't think my assistant's in here putting things in the chat box. So if some other of you would like to do that, you can put that in the chat box so we have it saved. So welcome, Helen. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Georgia.
I'm going to start with the first question. Is probably in a different order than we discussed yesterday, but I think what's on everybody's mind these days is climate and the climate chaos that we're in the midst of with hurricanes, flooding, fires. We're all focused on this. So one of the things that you've said is that with climate change, I want you to explain why nuclear power, which has been touted by several politicians, especially on the right, and a few scientists as an interim solution before we are fully off of fossil fuels. And I'd like you to explain to us why nuclear power is not an interim solution.
Well, to talk about that, I have to confront the nuclear psychopaths who are wedded to nuclear power. E equals MC squared is some sort of sexual deviance, I think, that attracts them. Nuclear power, okay, so you have to dig up the uranium. There's not a lot of high quality uranium in the world left. Then you have to enrich it to 3% for nuclear power plants. All of this involves a huge amount of fossil fuel. Then you have to build the reactor, and I think 30% of global warming is due to making concrete, which produces a huge amount of CO2. And of course, the reactors are made of concrete. Then you have to make the fuel rods of zirconium. Then you have to put them in the reactor, and it goes, and reactors use 1 million gallons of water a minute to generate the electricity, 1 million gallons a minute. And the water that's extruded from nuclear power plants is relatively radioactive. It's got tritium in it, but other isotopes as well. So it contaminates the water, you know, like near Indian Point or wherever the reactor is. After about 30 or 40 years, that's the end of the reactor's life. Then it has to be decommissioned, which just means taking it apart, and it's highly radioactive. So it's part of the nuclear waste. But apart from that, the reactor itself produces over 40 years huge amounts of radioactive waste, and no one knows where to put it. There's a bill called the Waste Confidence Bill in Congress, meaning they have confidence that over time they'll work out what to do with the radioactive waste, which must be stored isolated from the ecosphere for 1 million years, according to the EPA. And as this material leaks into water supplies and bioconcentrates in food chains, both in the water and terrestrial, we'll be eating and inhaling the radioactive elements. Each reactor makes over 200 radioactive elements. Some last seconds and some last millions of years. And as we and all other organisms ingest this radioactive material in our food and the air, so this will lead to epidemics of cancer, leukemia, genetic disease and congenital deformities, not just in humans, but animals and plants as well. That's nuclear power. I mean, it's a really terrific way to generate electricity. I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Now I can. No, I can't hear you.
Georgia, you're on mute.
Okay. All right. Now I'm not on mute. I think this is an interesting problem because we hear over and over again politicians who are still touting nuclear power as a stopgap measure or interim solution. And I think many people don't have enough arguments against it. And I think you just gave us several, Helen. And I also want to point to another scientist at Stanford University who you're familiar with, and I think have worked with, Mark Jacobson, who has also come out very strongly against the use of nuclear power for energy.
Can I just interrupt, Georgia?
Sure. Yes.
Politicians who supported it, both scientifically and medically ignorant. I mean, in this day and age of scientific sophistication, which is moving ahead very rapidly, I mean, politicians come from the community, you know, they're real estate agents or whoever, and most of them have not received a university education, or if they have, it's not relevant to the problems with nuclear power and genetic research and the like. So we're in the hands of incompetence.
Yes, I think that's very true. Along with that, do you anticipate any significant changes in US climate policy with Biden? Or are we still dealing with kind of an ill-fated incrementalism? What's your opinion?
We're ill-fated incrementalism. I know John Kerry quite well, and I thought he might be much more proactive and out there, but I hardly ever see anything that he's done at all. And I'm very disappointed. I think Biden is allowing oil pipelines to go ahead, and the federal government subsidizes oil and coal to a huge extent. I mean, all fossil fuel subsidies should be shut, period. And then, or closed, stopped. And then we've got to stop digging up coal, like now. For instance, in Australia, here's this huge continent bathed by sun, blown by wind. We could become the renewable energy superpower of the world. And what are our stupid politicians doing? They want to dig up coal because it means jobs. Jobs for death. That's what it means, jobs for death. Because I think we're beyond the tipping point now for global warming. I mean, Siberia is burning. And as Siberia burns, apart from killing billions and billions of organisms, it's releasing a lot of methane from the permafrost. And methane is 84 times more potent as a global warmer in the first 20 years of its existence than CO2. So, you know, from every perspective, we seem to be doomed, and we're run by ignorant, well, I'd almost call them sociopaths. Certainly in Australia, they are. What?
I'm having to mute some people because I'm hearing background noise. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think, you know, we're wanting to see significant change, and we're wanting to believe we're getting it. I don't know that there's.
We're not.
Yeah, that's what I fear, and that it's not happening quickly enough. So I want to move just a little bit away from that right now to something that's connected to nuclear power, but maybe more toward nuclear war. Is a lot of the military bases that the US has situated around the world. I think there are about 800 in different countries. And with the expansion of NATO up to the borders of Russia, pretty much on all sides, I'd like you to comment on if you think we're heading toward or already in the midst of a new Cold War scenario.
Of course, you're right in the middle of it. And who orchestrated it? Lockheed Martin orchestrated all the tiny little countries that were liberated by the end of communism along the border of Russia. And Gorbachev was promised by America that would not happen. Those countries would not join NATO. So Norman Augustine, who ran Lockheed Martin, went to all these little countries, Lithuania, Latvia and the like, and said, do you want to join NATO? You'd be a democracy. And to join NATO, they had to spend billions of dollars buying weapons. And he was the one who persuaded all those countries to join NATO, which is America. NATO is America. And Lockheed Martin is one of the major contractors and producers of nuclear weapons, missiles, ships, technology, you name it. Evil people. America spends half its discretionary budget on murder. It's not the Department of Defense, it's the Department of Death. Let's be frank, it's murder. Just look at Afghanistan. How many people were killed in Afghanistan? I mean civilians. I don't mean American soldiers, although that's bad enough. I mean, how dare America do this? And it went into Iraq and totally destroyed Iraq. I mean, why? Because there was oil there. Cheney and Rumsfeld are war criminals. In fact, when you think of the Pentagon, I mean, it should be closed down. You don't have a free medical care system. There are people sleeping in the streets. Reagan emptied out the mental hospitals. It just takes my breath away, And half the money, $1 trillion a year is spent on death. And why? Because the Lockheed Martin and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, all of these companies have put their factories producing the death machines in every congressional district. So it means jobs. It's jobs for killing. So if you look at what the votes add up to in Congress, almost every single Democrat and Republicans voted for the last military budget, which was $745 billion, I think. But it's actually more like $1 trillion when you get the black officers, the intelligence and the CIA and the NSA and all the rest. It's evil beyond belief, evil beyond belief. I just can't stress it enough. Meanwhile, we're killing the earth.
So do you see any solutions, anything that we can do as citizens here, any pressure we can mount and have any success with?
Yes, you need a revolution.
That's going to take a lot of work. I think it's...
Well, you've had revolutions before. I mean, I helped to lead the revolution in the 80s against nuclear weapons. Well, I was helped because I had an agent in Hollywood who worked for me for free, and she had John Cruise and Lily Tomlin and Sally Field as her people, and she'd put them on the television with me. No one wanted to hear a boring Australian doctor talk about nuclear war, but if they got Sally Field on too, or Lily or one of those, they'd love it. And so she got me in Vogue, Lifetime, and all the television stations, and Donahue, etc. And so Mr. and Mrs. Joe Sixpack, sitting back in their sitting rooms with their families, were educated about the medical effects of nuclear war. As Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. Now, I have to apologise for one Australian who's totally decimated your country, and that's Murdoch. He should die. He's evil beyond belief. I thought he might die in the saddle like Rockefeller did when he got his new girlfriend, but he hasn't. His mother lived to 101, she was a wonderful woman, but I mean, the peddling of lies, and it's just, anyway, you need a revolution, and we had one in the 80s, such that 80% of Americans at the end of the 80s supported the notion of a nuclear freeze, but really an abolition of nuclear weapons. And Gorbachev and Reagan meeting in Reykjavik almost over a weekend, 2 mere males almost agreed to abolish nuclear weapons, but Reagan was hung up on Star Wars. I met with Reagan in the White House for an hour and a quarter. I was alone with him and his daughter. He was an okay old man, but he was almost entirely ignorant about everything. I'd just written missile envy, so I'd facts and figures coming out of my ear holes, And so he'd make a statement and then I'd stop and correct him, and he'd get that malar flush. He'd get sort of red cheeks and anxious. So I held his hand. And so for half the time I held his hand, and we'd established a doctor-patient relationship, in fact. I thought I'd had no effect, but he did start after that to say nuclear war must never be fought and never be won. And so he and Gorbachev, as a result of our work, the physicians around the world met, but Reagan was attached to Star Wars. Gorbachev knew it would never work. He should have said to Reagan, yeah, have your Star Wars, but get rid of nuclear weapons. And so the whole thing floundered, and what a tragedy. What a tragedy for the world. What a tragedy.
I also thought when Gorbachev was removed from power that had a lot to do with the impossibility of working anything out. I think Gorbachev would have been a really good leader for Russia as it was transitioning.
He still is. I've got his photograph here on my bookshelf. He was a wonderful and is still a wonderful man. Wonderful, yeah. Wonderful man.
Well, we both met him at the State of the World Forum in San Francisco.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right.
Yes. Yeah. That was another thing that I attended to, playing the harp at, actually. So what do you think is the threat level of a nuclear war today? What level are we at? From 1 to 10, where would you put it?
10, where it's higher than it's ever been. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, which was founded during Einstein's era, has a clock that moves its hand towards midnight. And they moved it this year closer to it's ever been to midnight, 100 seconds. Why? There are now 9 countries with nuclear weapons, including Israel, let me say, who deny she has them. She's had lots of nuclear weapons. She's got the best technology. She's got spies in the Pentagon or people who work there who get the up-to-date technology. She's got everything. And then she's grizzling about Iran might, build one nuclear weapon. 9 countries, there's India and Pakistan at odds with each other. North Korea, I don't think he'd use it. Anyway, but then there's America, who's playing war games all over the world. She's got playing war games now against China and bringing in other countries with their ships and their submarines and their planes, flying B-52s over China. And then there are war games over, I think, in the Black Sea near Russia. I mean, you've got to have an enemy. The military-industrial complex has to have an enemy. Now, I don't think Joe Biden's a decent sort of fellow, but he's not an FDR. He hasn't got, or a JFK. JFK was killed because he gave a speech at American University calling for the abolition bilaterally of nuclear weapons. That's why they killed him. And so when you look at the human species, we're really, in a way, an evolutionary aberrant, aren't we? We've got the wisdom and knowledge to do the right thing, but we don't use it. Because I think the problem is testosterone, Georgia. I mean, men have gone to war and killed each other, and women and everything, over the ages for territorial imperative or whatever. Women, on the other hand, there's a very interesting experiment that was done by a woman in San Francisco. She was looking at hormones, and she noticed when there was an altercation in the lab, the men would go into their rooms, shut the door and fume. And the women would come in the next morning, clean the benches, make the coffee, make friends, and alleviate the situation. So she did the hormones. The men, of course, their testosterone went sky high, but the women's oxytocin went up. Now, oxytocin is a hormone emitted when you are lactating. And I remember when I was lactating, I felt I could feed the world. I'd have a dinner party and fall asleep in the soup because I was tired, but I wanted to feed everyone. And it's the hormone of friendship and compatibility. If you give men oxytocin via an aerosol into their nostrils, they become quite soft. I remember I gave a lecture once and a man came up and said, I've got prostate cancer. I had my first dose of estrogen the other day. He said, for the first time, I felt like shopping. So, and women are more than 50% of the population, and we live longer. And why on earth, every picture I see of the United Nations, of the Congress, they're all, excuse my French, but they're all bloody men. And I'm sick of it. Where are the women? We're highly intelligent. Why do we allow ourselves to take second place? We need to, you know, say to the men, stand aside, you've had your chance, we're taking over now. And in matriarchal societies, which Margaret Mead investigated, many of them were very peaceful. I think that's one way, one key to the future of not just the human race, but all species on the planet.
Well, you know, some of the examples we can see right now are Jacinda, forgot her last name, who's the president of New Zealand.
Ardern.
Just an extraordinary woman. And the fact that the Scandinavian countries all have, I think they even have a...
Iceland has a woman.
Yes, but they also have a parliament that requires at least 40% women in the parliament.
It should be 52% women. What's the 40%?
So it makes a huge difference in the legislation, in the policies.
Yep.
The focus is not preparing for war, but supporting the society and educating the society and taking care.
Nurturing and looking after the children.
Exactly. Yes.
I think testosterone is a very, very bad hormone.
Well, ungovernable in some ways when it is out of
control. And
control.
I think it's a position having examined men, you know.
Right. Well, I think, you know, that we've gone kind of far afield in looking at nuclear power, looking at the possibility that we are now in the midst of another Cold War. And of course, we've seen this happening over time as more and more money is thrown toward the military. And as you said, if that much money is going to have to go to the military, we always have to have an enemy. And I'm sure you remember back at the fall of the USSR, there was the talk of the peace dividend. And we were all so excited that we were going to have money redirected into social programs, taken away from the war machine. And not only did it not happen, but more money escalated into the whole war economy. So I wonder if you have anything just to say about that, because we will go to questions from our audience shortly.
Well, to get the START treaty through, which president was it, had to promise Senator, and I can't remember his name either, to spend $1.7 trillion on replacing every single nuclear weapon, submarine, ship, plane, missile over the next 30 years. And that's what's happened. Mm-hmm. $1.7 trillion. I mean, it's beyond evil. It's beyond evil. And I just don't know what to say, you know, and people call themselves Christians.
Yeah, it's a disconnect.
Disconnect, that's a benign word to describe it.
I know sometimes I'm very polite, especially
well,
when I'm recording.
And we're bad in Australia because we swear a lot. Americans call it cursing, but that's who we are. And I mustn't do it for you because you wouldn't like it.
No, well, when we record, we're more careful. But anyway, I wanted to know before we go into Q&A with our audience, is there anything you want to finish with telling us before we end this part of the program?
I think I mean, look what I did in America. And I was one woman and I was an alien. And I just was determined. I don't know how I knew, but I knew to do what I did. And if as I said in my film, if you love this planet, you know, and the children and you need to lead a revolution. You need to get out there and harness the powers you have to save the planet. I can't tell you anything else. And the other thing is, you've all got representatives, senators and congresspeople. You need to go and see them once a week or when they're back in their home office and educate them and say, if you don't read this book and vote for this, I'll make sure you're not re-elected. And that's using your democracy.
Right.
There's a lot of power in that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you can get to know them. You know, you can be seductive and whatever you have to be with them, but they're the people who represent you.
Right.
And if you don't do that and use your democracy, you don't have a democracy.
And of course, the other part of having a democracy, and you mentioned it earlier, is being educated about what is going on in the country.
Of course,
so we
yes.
all have a responsibility as citizens to be educated about these issues so that we don't have nuclear power as an interim means of energy, and that we really get renewable energy on board, and that we start pulling back from the
Look, every house in America should have solar panels for heating the water and for electricity. There should be all electric cars, but they should be powered by renewable energy. So on every garage, there should be solar panels, not burning coal to make electricity to power the electric vehicles, which is one way from producing CO2 anyway. There should be windmills all across the country. There's enough wind west of the Mississippi, I think, to supply 3 times the amount of electricity America needs. You know, you can do it now and you can employ millions of people. But I think in this new bill I've just passed, $1 trillion, very little of that money is going to renewable energy. I think a lot is going to coal and stuff.
That was another thing I just want to mention, because I think it's very important, is Mark Jacobson's work of showing how every country in the world could be operating on 100% renewable energy by 2030, and with the jobs it would create, the type of energy mix that each area would need. And it's an extraordinary program. He's a professor at Stanford in climate engineering, and I think you can look it up online. I'll put it in the chat box when people are asking questions.
Yep.
So what I'd like to do now is open it up for people who would like to ask questions of Helen or make comments. Do we have anyone who would like to start? It always takes them a little bit of time to get ready to ask questions. So, oh, and there's Mike. Okay, Mike.
Well, I'll say one thing real quick. First of all, it's just a fantastic, incredible talk that you just gave. But the first thing that comes to my mind is watching you, listening to your passion. I feel like we need about 1 billion people, women like you, or maybe even 100 million in every single government in every single country in the world. And maybe something would get done, because the things you're talking about, we all we understand. I don't understand it quite as well as you do, but probably if I read the book or spent a couple of days with you, I'd understand more. But I do basically grasp what's going on here, and it just feels so incredibly overwhelming. But you say it kind of funny and you try to throw in humor, but we're talking about basically 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the end of the world, basically. I think people realize that's what's going on right now. So I just don't know that, you say, well, go to your congressman or go to this, but then you also say, well, they're dummies, they don't know anything about it. So if you educate them,
what you do is you threaten them. I'm serious, because they are your representatives. You own them, and that therefore you say, if you don't vote thus and thus and read this, and then you door knock. You go around your electorate and educate people. You get on the local radio and teach them, and make sure that if he doesn't or she doesn't vote the right way, they won't get elected. That works. That works. I used to go into Congress, and darling Tip O'Neill would come out from chairing the House floor and say to me, "What can I do for you, doctor?" Because there are so many people behind me. That's power. And you can get that power, but you have to get off your bottom stop looking at your computer, find out when your congressman or senator is home, go and make friends with them, bake them a cake or something. And then just, and walking is very good for you when you get older. It's good for your brain. So you go and door knock with a piece of literature that's easy to understand, that's compatible, that people would like to look at, you know? I mean, you have to use your brains.
And the other thing is, if you bring books or articles, very often the staff reads these things and then they educate the congressperson or the senator. So the staff does a lot of that work, and it's important to make friends with the staff or the staffs of these elected officials.
Oh, but
Well,
first,
thank you for all that.
what? No, I mean,
Thank you for everything you're saying. It's really wonderful.
oh, well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it very much. One Congress senator who's doing good work is Ed Markey. So you can communicate with Ed Markey's office. I know Ed. We got the nuclear freeze through in 1984 through the House, the nuclear weapon.
Ed Markey?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I think Ben is next. You want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. It's more just a brief commentary. I grew up in the beginning of the nuclear age in Tucson, Arizona, which was surrounded by Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. So we were ringed by 21 Titan missile sites. So we all knew that if there was a nuclear exchange, we were all going to be fused into the desert glass. And so it had a negative effect, I think, a lot of my peers and in myself, in terms of certain kind of nihilism developed out of that, because I was confident I would not. At the height of the Cold War, I was certain that I wasn't going to make it to 21. So that made me less cautious than it might have been. But so the comment is this, though. Now I'm hearing, my problem is I talk to these kids who are freaked out about climate change. And I told them, I said, I can't develop two major existential angst in one lifetime. I've already lived through this. We just thought it would be quick. You guys have it worse because you're going to go down slow, and I'm going to be dead before you get the worst of it. But I think it's important to remember, when people start kind of doing the doomer thing about their climate change is the end of the world, we've been here before. I lived through this for decades. So this is not the only end of the world we've had to deal with. Thank you.
Any comments, Helen?
It'll either end with a bang or a whimper. It's either nuclear winter or global warming. And both, we're on track for both. As I talk and I think, we need a revolution. I mean, we need to take over Congress, not by those idiots that did it for stupid Trump. But,
No, we're dealing with a very
bunch of dress as angels, or whatever.
we're dealing with a very severe split in our country with the QAnon Trumpites. So I want to go to Linda. She's next.
I don't have, my issue isn't much different from what Ben just said, but I was a climate change activist in Tucson for years. And I mean, when I think of the nuclear threat, it's like, going up the tree again. It's like, what right now would spark the kind of attention back on nuclear? I mean, climate is bad enough. The IPCC report just came out and it's horrible. I mean, that is getting some press right now, but I don't see anything I don't see anybody talking about nuclear rearmament, though I know it's going on. It does, really bother me. I live in Dana Point, and we have a nuclear plant that's been, unplugged, but we have all this waste that's just sitting there. I mean, there could be a ship that could just bomb it, and we'd die. We would all die right here. So I don't know how to get people's attention. I mean, what is out there right now that would
Well,
spark
you know,
attention?
I'm sure you have talkback radio, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, now listen to me. And you look as though you've got bombs on your T-shirt.
Oh, they're actually little pineapples. They're not
Oh,
bombs.
okay, sorry. Anyway, I had a friend in Adelaide called Jean Minard. She's dead now. She used talkback radio, and she'd ring and she'd disguise her voice each time. Once she was Mrs. Brown, and then she was Mrs. Green, and through talkback radio and those guys who run it, or people, you can educate a lot of people. That's one thought. You can make friends with your television station. You can invade a radio station. I mean, that you've got to be able to put your body on the line, I guess, but for a peaceful purpose. You've got to attract attention of the media. It's like the march we had, Georgia, where you were at the meeting in San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah.
So what was happening was Gorbachev was speaking in the Herbst Lecture Theatre, which is where the United Nations Treaty was signed by one of our prime ministers and someone else. And we were in another theatre with Patch Adams, and there was a huge crowd there just next to the Gorbachev Theatre. And Patch Adams said, and we were talking about Y2K, and the press was totally disinterested. So Patch went to the microphone and said, I've been telling Helen since July we should walk naked across America. And I thought, oh God, Patch. So I went up to the mic and I said, hands up those who'll take their clothes off and have a naked march. Every single hand went up. So we went out into this red sort of velvet foyer, and people started taking their clothes off. So I thought, oh, well, I'll take mine off. I had a long scarf which hid the naughty bits. And we led the march, and there must have been at least 50 naked people walking down
Van Ness Avenue.
Yeah, Van Ness Avenue. And people started chanting, nudes, not nukes. Nudes, not nukes. And cars would pull up and go, and get out. People started clapping us, and they didn't even know why we were doing it, but they were clapping us. And then we came back because it was cold. We didn't want to go off in police cars to the jail naked, stark naked. When we got back, no one wanted to put their clothes on. They're all standing in the foyer, stark naked. I'm doing an interview with ABC on the phone. And it was just, and we got in the New York Times the next day.
Right.
So it wasn't a naughty thing to do. And you realize that all bodies, well, I know that as a doctor, but slim ones, tall ones, fat ones, everybody, every single human body is beautiful. And people are so proud of themselves. Now, that's just a little example, but you have to use your imagination to work out how to use your democracy. And you do have a democracy. And you do have a man who's president, who's a kindly man. He's still a sort of a neocon, stuck in the old ways of thinking in a way. But when that woman sat on the steps of Congress all night because she'd been homeless herself, he then passed a bill or organised something to stop people being evicted from their houses. Do you see how just one very intelligent, clever thing can change the whole country's attitude towards something? Do you see?
But I get you. But what I'm asking is there something happening right now that would reignite interest in the nuclear arms arena? Because I don't see anything that would get.
Yes, it is. They're building nuclear weapons like there's no tomorrow, and there will be no tomorrow. I mean, what are you asking for?
Well, I'm just asking, has something, just recently happened that we could bring attention to that would reignite?
Yeah, America conducting war games all over the bloody world. Who does America think she is? She's got 888 bases in 80 countries. She's metastasized like a cancer. Who does America think she is, or it is?
what I'm asking, Helen, is I understand. It's bad.
Let me just interject. I understand what you're both saying, and you're kind of talking at cross purposes here. I think what you're looking for is what is the movement? What is the thing that's happening right now that we could accelerate? And I don't see anything right now either, because there are two prongs to this, and we brought them both up in the discussion. One is nuclear power as energy, which is a problem. And the other is the nuclear arms race. So we've got two places where we might be able to enter in. And I think what we're looking for, Helen, do you know of any particular movement or something that's already going on that we could attach to?
Well, there's Physicians for Social Responsibility, but they've become quite conservative. Then there's Women's Action for New Direction, which I founded, which was Women's Action for Nuclear Disarmament. And they're a bit, I don't see the ferocity and the fire and the sort of brilliance in someone to start the whole thing off again. I don't see that. People have settled back into comfort zones. And I guess you've got to be uncomfortable.
We've got so many problems, Helen. We've got housing problems, healthcare.
No, but forget that. We're talking about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And you look up in space, there are 100 million galaxies. I mean, and look at this beautiful, beautiful planet of ours. Beautiful. Look out my window and see my garden. And I see the birds every day. Our responsibility is so vast. And Linda,
I'm just asking, what's the spark? Because without a spark, it's hard to get people's attention.
What kind of spark do you want?
You know, climate change right now, there's more attention around it with Extinction Rebellion, with the Sunrise Movement. There are people who are really doing things around climate. And that took a lot of energy to get that going. But to get the whole nuclear thing going again, I don't see it unless we could.
It is connected though, Linda.
Yeah, of course it's connected. Yeah. It's all connected. I mean, it goes.
Linda, I'll tell you what, why don't you get onto the squad? AOC. No, they're brilliant. They're absolutely, now Linda, here's what you do. You get a beautiful suit, dress yourself up, go to Washington and make an appointment with AOC and the 4 others. They're brilliant women. Take a book. I mean, you could take missile energy with you, or nuclear power is not the answer, whatever. And take some other, if you've got a friend who's a doctor, and you've got a friend who's a minister, you know, you have to look very conservative, but and absolutely upright, and make an appointment, go and see them, make friends with them, and get them to understand the urgency of this situation. Like the planet is in the intensive care unit. We're the doctors to the dying planet. And, you know, things are very grim, and just one little mistake could mean the end of everything. So if you go, I mean, you mightn't convince all of them, but you might get one right on it. And I'd go and see that lovely woman who sat on the steps of Congress for 2 nights too. You know, pick out the ones who you think could have an impact.
Right. Yes, we need a praxis trip to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, do that. All of the people here who are on this thing, I'm sure you've got beautiful suits. Wear your best jewelry. Make yourself, because I used to say I should call my book, if you wear pearls, you can say anything. People believe you. People believe you.
If absolutely true.
If there are churches in your electorate, you know, you could go and maybe give a sermon.
Very good. Yeah, I think you've hit on something, Helen.
If there are Jewish people here, you know, you could go to your synagogues, and Jewish people are fantastic once they get going.
Very good activists.
Yeah.
Looks like we have Lori. You want to ask something?
I just wanted to say, Helen, I think you need your own YouTube channel. okay? And keep blasting an hour a day, all right? And we'll all start joining and you'll become a headliner and then everyone will be getting the message. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, you know.
Thank you. Why don't you organize it for me? And I'll do it.
I've organized quite a few things, okay, in my lifetime. And I'm one of those politicians that obviously did care about the climate and definitely worked locally. And we need a lot more people working locally.
I don't
not
know
just
how to organize a YouTube channel. Georgia, why don't we do it together?
Okay, well, this is interesting. I've had another one of our speakers offer to do one with me too. So maybe we should all talk about this. Yeah, we've been talking about doing a YouTube channel program that would get these ideas out there to a lot of people. I was listening to one this morning, Tom Hartman. I've seen.
Well, he's a lovely man.
He's extraordinary, and he has a 3-hour program every single day, which you can reach through Facebook. And I was listening to him, and he's so brilliant. And he had a Congressman Ro Khanna on his show today, and they talk about the most interesting topics. And you really get educated listening to a show like that. And I think what you're talking about and what I was talking about with another one of our speakers is creating an educational channel like that, where people can get the information of things that are happening right now and the background for them. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. So Brian, you are next.
So Helen, thank you for being with us today. So I got a thought. I wanted to share a question for you. So when Trump was around, who I thought was a disgrace, but on the international front, he said he wanted to move the troops out of Somalia. The Pentagon just moved them to the next country, Kenya. When he said, I want to reduce the troops in Germany, cut it by 12,000, everyone went ballistic. So he couldn't even take on the military industrial complex because they just overrode him.
Yep. Interestingly, you brought that up. He wanted to make friends with Russia, and Russia wants to make friends with America too. Putin has said that time and time again. Russia isn't communist anymore, it's capitalist. He didn't start any wars. He was on the international scene a pacifist. It's interesting, isn't it? You're absolutely
yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And how dare the military industrial complex criticize him for doing that? How dare they? I mean, do they still want to kill people? Murder, it's murder. I mean, I think we need to call it what it is. Killing people is murder. I've spent my life trying to save people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a very uphill task. It's Sisyphusian. Do we have any other questions, comments from other?
Well, I could say one other thing, that
Sure.
the language the Pentagon uses is very sexual. You know, missile erectors, soft laydowns,
Right.
deep penetration, hard lines and soft lines, nuclear war like one big orgasmic wump. You know, it's all testosterone oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of writers have commented on the type of language that's used to describe military excursions, military equipment, weapons.
I wrote about it in Missile Envy. You know, Linda, why don't you write an article for the local paper about it?
There we go.
Write an article.
Could I ask what started the rearmaments? Do you know? Like things got better
It
after
never stopped. It never stopped.
The military industrial complex. They, you know, I talked about Norman Augustine from Lockheed Martin. No, it never stopped.
Never
They-
stopped.
And we were doing an end run around them when we got 1 million people in Central Park. That's when Reagan brought in Star Wars. And he'd only talked to Edward Teller about it, and people wandering around the Pentagon saying, what's this Star Wars stuff? He was such a stupid old fool. I came out with from my discussion with him saying I thought he had impending Alzheimer's, and the diagnosis was accurate.
Yes. We've had several presidents who don't seem very well educated on what they should know. One of the things I've thought for years is, why aren't there qualifications that a person has to meet in order to be running for president, not just to be age 35 or older, but if you're going to be CEO of a company, you have to have qualifications. There are requirements. But to become president, there doesn't seem to be any real requirements.
Constitution, you know, the Constitution's written in stone and no one is allowed to disobey it.
We need I think we need a constitutional Congress to relook at a lot of this, because, you know, not only is the nuclear industry or the war industry so heavily armed, we also have a gun problem in the US, which is, yes, you know that. Ray, you want to ask a question?
Well, I just wanted to caution you about that constitutional Congress, because the right wing states, there's about 35 of them that are that have already decided to push it, and they've been doing a dry run every year that are, you know, funded by the Koch brothers and all of that. You'll hear Tom Hartman talk about a long critique on all of that, but you know, I just wanted to say that you know, my life was kind of filled with nuclear irony. You know, I started doing you know, opposition to you know, the PG&E nuclear plant back in the 80s. And then a few years later, I ended up working for them in another capacity, thankfully. But, you know, just life has its twists and turns. Yeah, I'm just afraid that the kind of interface between, you know, possible nuclear war and climate change is that some sort of nuclear exchange that wipes out humanity is, you know, kind of the Gaian, you know, solution to climate change. I fear that. I don't know if you see that kind of course.
Nuclear winter, and you know, that's the opposite to global warming.
Right.
In the yang.
Not the good seasonal type. I think someone with an iPhone, is that you, Julie? Or is it
Yes,
Katie?
it's
Julie.
me. Hi,
Hi.
everybody. I think we need to investigate nuclear waste and all of the states where they have buried those whatever radioactive, and how long the lifespan of the burial chambers, the cement or whatever, is going to last. And I think it would be great if PBS could do a whole update on the subject of nuclear energy, who's paying the bills, how it's being stored, whatever is happening, so that we could begin to re-educate ourselves on that particular danger.
That's a very good idea. If you go to the Nuclear Information Resource Service, NIRS, and what's the other one? Nuclear. They've recently produced a paper on all the, in fact, I'll send it to Georgia, on all the radioactive storage sites all over America, and and the nuclear reactors, the whole thing. What a terrible, terrible mess it is. And so I'll send that to Georgia, and she can send it to all of you. Then you can ring PBS. It's your idea. You do it, and get them onto this to do a really, really good series on nuclear power, nuclear waste.
That would also be a very good 60 Minutes program on CBS.
Yeah, of course it would.
Yes,
because they do things like that.
Also, I would like to suggest that somehow every organization like Audubon Society and all of the rest of them develop a special section about nuclear energy to educate all the people on their email lists and their podcasts and whatever.
Well, therefore, you need to ring Audubon. This is your idea.
You do it.
Thought of it, and you do it. Okay.
It's huge. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You promise me?
Doctor, I saw you speak in San Francisco at the Presidio a long, long time ago, and I have been inspired by your work ever since. I'll try.
Thank you.
Good. Do you have an idea? I guess we're responsible to follow through on the idea. So anybody else? Oh, it looks like Lori, are you still wanting to ask something again?
Actually, I just wanted to comment that one of the best things we could do as far as the senators and congressmen is once we get the list of where all this waste is stored, to actually demand a study of the locality and how this has impacted or will impact the residents who live in those vicinities. Because if you were told that you're sitting on top of cancer or whatever, real estate values, other things of that nature that you have invested in the future of your children, or fertility for children, could be majorly upset. And this would be such a wake-up call for people.
There are communities like that already doing that across the nation now, and it's very hard work and it's very sad, and a lot of them have got cancer and their kids and stuff. It's a really uphill job, but I commend you for thinking about that, and I will definitely send this map with all the waste storage sites.
And Lori was a former mayor of Sonoma, so she's very politically active.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
So I want to go back
Thank you. You're an inspiration.
Indeed.
Not that I might run again, but you're very inspiring. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get her to run again.
Yeah, run again.
So I think Brian wanted to say something again.
So Helen, I'll share with you one thing I'm doing. I made a custom stamp and it says, military spending is killing us.
Yes.
And I put this on every dollar bill, every PG&E, AT&T bill, okay, go to the grocery store, and all my dollar bills, all of them say, military spending is killing us. Now, some stores, some people won't take this, okay? They reject it. They say, we're not going to take that, but it creates a wonderful conversation to raise awareness.
Excellent. Good man.
These creative ideas are the way to go. Yeah.
To raise awareness.
Yes.
Yep.
Awareness. Anybody else?
Stephanie's been trying to get in.
Who has?
Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie, sorry, I didn't see you. Okay, Stephanie, go ahead. Where is she?
Right here.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, well, about the waste, of course, we've already, all of our nuclear sites have contaminated all the surrounding lands and water, and they're probably on that map too. So I think that the key is to connect the nuclear weapons with global climate change. Yeah. And the military is the world's biggest polluter.
That's
true.
And
they are Code Pink. Linda, you wanted an organization. If you, I can send you the information. Actually, I think I put it in my column in the Sun this week. Code Pink is organizing a demonstration at Glasgow to demand that money be taken from the arms programs and spent to take care of climate change. And I think that way, that's the ultimate connection for our time, really. If we can connect nuclear weapons and climate change, we would have a movement if we really tried.
The Pentagon needs to be closed down. The Pentagon
needs, that would be a good angle.
That's a little harder to achieve, but I think Stephanie,
if you have way out ideas, that sometimes grabs the imagination of people.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting combination that Stephanie just brought up. I think that would be very helpful, both in terms of educating and actually accomplishing something. So great idea. Anyone else? And if not, I'm going to have Helen give us some final words of wisdom as we complete the program. Let's hear your words of wisdom, Helen.
Words of wisdom. I think it's terribly, it suddenly occurred to me when I was driving one day in New England, how lucky I was that my sperm reached my egg. Of the millions of sperm that my father produced that night, each different, my sperm reached my egg, and how incredibly lucky we are and fortunate, and how life is so valuable and just extraordinary.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know if that helps anyone, but that's what occurred to me.
I think that's very important. I mean, we don't even think about that, the
No.
miracle that we're here.
It's an absolute miracle that we're here, and therefore we're born with an enormous amount of responsibility. That's what it's all about.
Mm. Yes.
We hold life on our planet in the palm of our hands. We carry it on our shoulders like Atlas.
Yes. I think that's a good way to complete today, is to understand the miracle and the responsibility. I know a lot of times in our country, we're focused on rights instead of responsibilities. And I think,
That's right.
yeah, appreciating the miracle and understanding that and valuing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're very inspiring, Helen. It's wonderful to hear you, see you, and see how spunky you are.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone. Love to you all.
Yes, love
Lots
to
of
you,
love,
Helen.
Okay.
gratitude.
Bye.
Bye.